1912.
Let's take a look at the front pages of Monday's newspapers now. The Metro massacre at church is their headline after the deaths of at least 26 people. This was after a gunman opened fire at a Baptist service in southern Texas. The Telegraph leads on a warning from the Home Secretary Amber Rudd that more ministers are likely to be sacked over the Westminster sexual harassment scandal. The Sun says pornographic material was found on the Deputy Prime Minister Damien Green's computer, something he vehemently denies. The Guardian tells how millions of pounds from the Queen's private estate has been invested in offshore tax havens and also in a well-known UK retailer, which it says has been accused of exploiting the poor and vulnerable. Same story for the Mirror. Their headline, the Queen's £10 million tax haven scandal. Likewise, Daily Mail, it's quoting royal officials as saying they were not aware of any tax advantages and that the Queen wasn't involved directly in these investments. The Times says the leaked documents in question also name a former Tory treasurer, the singer Bono, and a senior figure in the Trump administration. The Eye goes into a bit more detail. It says that Bono bought a shopping centre in Lithuania using an offshore fund based in Malta. The FT reports on a major corruption purge within the Saudi government. At least 11 princes, senior officials and businessmen all arrested. Weather warning on the front page of the Express. Winter will arrive with a vengeance this month. And it says there could even be a white Christmas. My next guest rolling his eyes at that. He's heard all that before, and that's because he was the longest-serving journalist and news anchor in the UK, reporting from every corner of the globe during a 50-year career. Well, he began it in radio and soon made his way into the field as a foreign correspondent, reporting on some of the most important news events of our time. He joined Sky News back in 1993, spearheading our bureau in Johannesburg and establishing Sky's first US bureau in Washington, where he signed off for the very last time last year. Can you guess who it is yet? It's because he hasn't spoken yet. If you'd have heard his voice, you'd have known. Jeremy Thompson, welcome back to Sky News.
Lovely to see you. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
It feels like no time since you left us at all, because your big sign-off was around this time last year, actually. We were out in America, weren't we, talking about President Trump's election, and you've put everything in a new book called Breaking News. I mean, how have you condensed a 50-year career into one book?
No, I really don't know. And there are loads that I missed out or I've forgotten. As my wife said, well, if you can't remember the story, just forget it. So there's quite a lot of those. So they may come back to me. So perhaps there's a second book, I don't know. But this is some highlights, put it like that.
Well, you say highlights, you have pretty much covered everything in news during that time. I mean, everything from your time in South Africa, time of apartheid, Nelson Mandela, somebody who you knew very well, to 2 Gulf Wars, the Soa murders. Let's start with South Africa, because that was a huge part of your career. You spent so much time there during a time where so much happened.
It was, yeah, I mean, it was one of the great privileges of being in news to see the changing of history before your very eyes as a live event. I grew up as a kid thinking I'd never see the end of the Troubles in Northern Ireland and I'd never see the end of apartheid. So to be there and to see Mandela come out of jail and to see the negotiations, the turbulence, the near civil war in the early 90s that eventually turned into the day that he made his Rainbow Nation speech and became the first democratic and the first black president of South Africa was an incredible thing to watch and to be able to report on and to take it to viewers around the world. So it's very exciting times.
You always talk about the privilege of your job, and the book's called Breaking News, and you have been live on the ground in some very dangerous situations, literally right at the heart of the story. I'm talking about the Gulf War, when you presented live on location there, but in various trouble spots around the world.
Yeah, the very first day I set up the Sky Bureau in South Africa and went out to do a story on a Sunday in January in early '94. It was, let's just go out and check out. They say that peace has broken out in a little township just outside Johannesburg. We got there, and within 5 minutes, people started opening fire on us. We were caught in the middle of a firefight in a township in derelict buildings, and the cameraman in front of me was shot dead, another journalist injured, and it was, and as I remember saying in a piece to camera, an extraordinary and upsetting day for us, but for the people who lived there, it was an everyday occurrence. This was the life that they was subjected to. And I just felt sometimes you do have to take risks to tell people what it's like to live in a difficult area on the front line of life in dangerous and difficult times. So I never went seeking trouble, never felt I was a brave guy. Sometimes you just have to go there to tell stories that other people wouldn't know about otherwise.
When you talk about putting your life on the line to tell the story in a situation like that, I'd be interested to know what you make of the phrase fake news that has come into, common language now. Everybody uses it, and it didn't really start until just after that US election. So since you've stepped away from Sky News, the term mainstream media being used as a term of abuse, the term fake news coming into use as well. What do you make of that? Because obviously journalists, like you said, put their lives on the line to tell the story. It
was pretty clear during the Trump election that there was a lot of misinformation around. And my view is that fake news is nothing new. It's just a new term for propaganda and misinformation, which has gone on since the beginning of mankind. But it's just more insidious and more pervasive because we live in a rapid media age of social media and mass media and new media, which means that messages that are right or wrong can get out there within a split second. And therefore, fake news can be more insidious. It can get into the fabric of society much quicker. And people seem to, at the moment, be struggling to sometimes distinguish the sense between right and wrong. So I think fake news is dangerous. It's eating away at the, if you like, the mainstream media establishment. It means that journalists like us who work in what is called the mainstream have to fight doubly hard to persuade people we really are presenting genuine news, real facts to them, and not fake news. It's a bit of a battle going on, and since I've stepped away, I suppose I'm watching that almost as much as anything else with the greatest of interest to see how we, in our sort of end of the business, handle it.
In terms of everything you've done, I mentioned the Soham murders there before, and as a correspondent out on a story, you never know what twist a story is going to take, and you actually spoke to Ian Huntley during
I spoke to a murderer without knowing he was a murderer. It's one of those most extraordinary situations that a journalist can find themselves in. 15 years ago this year, so there's been a lot of recall of that awful story, which started out as a hunt for some missing girls. And those iconic images that most people will still remember of two pretty little girls in their Manchester United football tops who'd wandered off to get some sweets from a Sunday afternoon barbecue in a quiet village in the Cambridgeshire Fens, a village which I'd covered as a lad, as a teenager, as a local newspaper reporter, that in the end turned into a murder story. And the day before he was arrested, I spoke to Huntley in trying to do a live timeline for Sky. So he was put in this odd position of talking to a man that 24 hours later becomes accused of being the murderer. And without seeing, I mean, the truth is that psychopaths and sociopaths are splendidly good liars. And he was probably enjoying the publicity of me putting him on the spot and him telling a load of lies about what really happened.
There have been some lighter moments as well, because I can't let you go without saying that you were the voice of authority on Shaun of the Dead. So many people remember you from that film and telling us how to tackle zombies. What did you have to do?
I had to warn people that the only way to stop a zombie is to remove their brains or cut off their head.
There you go.
Which Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are watching television and taking no notice, and then suddenly realise maybe they ought to take some notice, rush outside, and there are the zombies in the garden. But the curious thing is the whole new generation of kids coming up today who say, "Oh, you're that bloke on Shaun of the Dead." And then there's a pause, and then they say, "So what else do you do?"
Well, does quite a lot. Buy his book, you'll find out exactly what he's done. JT, so good to have you back in. I could talk to you all day. And your voice, we miss your voice. I'm too high pitched.
I'd break the glass in this lovely studio.
The reverberations. Our sound man would have an absolute nightmare. Jeremy, best of luck with the book. Lovely to see you. We do miss you. Jeremy Thompson there. Jackie is coming up with all the sport. That'll be after the break.